What's up, everybody? It's Jordan, and welcome to the Sports 2 Hine Show. Today, I'm joined by Braeden Guthrie, also known as the Bengals NFL on Instagram. How you doing today, Braeden?
I'm doing good. A little disappointed from last night, but still really excited for day two of the draft. There's still a lot of great opportunities for the Bengals, so I'm still really excited to see what's coming up.
Yeah, I cannot wait for night two of the draft. We're going to be kind of recapping night one. What went right, what went wrong for the Bengals, all the crazy madness that happened in the first round of the draft. So many just insane picks. I don't think any of us thought was going to happen. We're talking about, targets of the Bengals today, maybe some targets tomorrow as well. But, we'll go ahead and get started talking about the Bengals' first round pick. They drafted 28th overall yesterday, and that is Clemson edge rusher Myles Murphy. Braeden, go ahead and let you start off with this one. What are your thoughts on the Bengals selecting Myles Murphy 28th overall?
So I dislike this pick for a few reasons. For one, I think in general he was a reach. I think he was a second round talent. I had a mid second on him. So just that alone, that makes me not like the pick. And then I also dislike the pick because of the other guys that were available. Obviously, Michael Mayer, the tight end out of Notre Dame, who most of us wanted, picking him over or picking Murphy over Michael Mayer really hurts. And there's other prospects such as Joey Porter Jr. and name slipping me. My apologies.
Nolan Smith.
And yeah, thank you, Nolan Smith. So when you take a guy like him, who I said I think is a second round talent, over those type of guys, I think you're making a really big mistake. That's a poor value pick. So just when you mix and those guys would have more of an impact as well. So when you factor in you can just say level compared to the rounds they're predicted to draft and the impact you'll have versus the other prospects, I think that's a poor pick.
I would 100% agree. I don't hate the pick. I don't love the pick by any means. They definitely could have gone worse, but they definitely could have gone better also. Heading into yesterday, we were texting back and forth. It seemed like as we were getting closer to the draft, I was getting more and more nervous that we were going to be able to screw it up somehow. And I'm not going to say we completely screwed up, but I felt like we screwed up a little bit. I wanted Mayer, Joey Porter Jr., or Nolan Smith. Any of those three. To me, I feel like heading into the draft, there was like a 0% chance all three of those guys were going to be there. I've not seen a single mock draft with Joey Porter slipping past 20. It seemed like he was almost a lock to go to the Steelers at 17, and then all of a sudden, he's available at 28. Nolan Smith, a guy who, if it wasn't for injuries, is, to me, a lock to be a top 15 pick. He's one of the best players in this draft. You look at Michael Mayer, many consider him to be the best tight end in this draft class. I know tons of Bengal fans were wanting Mayer at 28. And what you're saying with kind of like the immediate impact, Michael Mayer will have a much more immediate impact than Myles Murphy right now. I know you posted something on Instagram, can't remember if it was today or last night, that we need to have kind of a realistic expectation for Myles Murphy. He's not going to start at edge for us this year. He's going to be a rotational guy. But when you look at a guy like Michael Mayer, he would have more of an impact and he would play much more snaps in his rookie year than Myles Murphy would this year. Joey Porter, I feel like he would have more meaningful snaps this year than Myles Murphy. And when you look at Porter, one good thing, if you would have drafted him, Jacoby Louisier is coming off a season-ending injury, and he only has 1 year left on his deal. We signed Jones, but that is a replacement for Apple, but that's only a 1 year deal. And when you look at our corners, we have a nice corner group, but 1 year from now, we're in some trouble when it comes to our contract situations. I know our defensive line and our edge group kind of had a letdown performance this past season, but I still think, Porter, Nolan Smith, or Michael Mayer would have been much better options. I'm all for best player available, but also it's important not to reach a team need. But if there's a situation where it's a team need and the best player available, you always do that. And the Bengals had a prime opportunity to do that with corner, with Joey Porter Jr., or Michael Mayer with tight end. Even Nolan Smith, to me, I know he's the same position as Myles Murphy. I think Nolan Smith is better. And when it comes to without his injuries, he would have been drafted much higher. I think he's better than Myles Murphy. All three of those guys to me are better than Murphy. But yeah, overall, I'm not real thrilled about the Bengals selection drafting Myles Murphy 28th overall. I would have been super, super happy with any of those three guys. And it's not like I was kind of fixating on just one certain player. I know how some people kind of fixate on one guy. And if their team doesn't draft their one guy, they get all upset. Mayer, Joey Porter, or Nolan Smith to me would have been happy with any of those. But we take Myles Murphy instead. Not too happy about this pick at 28.
Yeah, and like you said, it's not that we didn't get the one guy we want. It's not that we didn't get a tight end. It's just simply the player that makes us disappointed. If the roles were reversed and let's say Michael Mayer was the one who needed to sit in development and Myles Murphy was the one ready to start day one, then yeah, you absolutely take Myles Murphy, but that's simply not the case. And no, having a rookie sitting and developing isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's something we see common, but that does become less effective when there are guys who can come here and start day one. No, yeah, Murphy has a lot of potential. And yeah, the Bengals were 30th in the league in sacks, but Murphy, he didn't really produce sacks in college. No, I'm an analytics major, so I'm all about looking at the numbers. And as something that has been consistent is if you're not productive in college, it's hard to be more productive in the NFL, much like a quarterback's completion percentage. It's hard to improve that at the next level. That's not to say Murphy won't, but history shows these are kind of boom or bust when you have these really athletic edges, but don't have much of a pass rush arsenal. They're hit or miss, and yeah, I have a lot of confidence in Lou Anarumo. But at the end of the day, even with the best coaches, these guys are far from guaranteed into developing into the players we want him to be.
And when you look at the Bengals' first round picks, I would say pretty much since forever, it seems like it is absolutely boom or bust. There is absolutely whatsoever no in between. When you look at Daxton Hill, I'm not going to say he's a bust already, but after his rookie year, he did not live up to a first round pick last season. Jamar Chase was a boom pick. Burrow was a boom pick. Then you have guys like Jonah Williams and some of these other guys, Billy Price, John Ross. And it seems like if it's either going to be a boom or bust. And that's basically what you're saying could be the case for Myles Murphy. He has potential. I mean, the one thing I do like about him is at his age, he just turned 21 in January. That's kind of crazy to me because that means I'm over a year older than the guy the Bengals just drafted in the draft. When you look at him, I mean, he's 6'5", 270. You like the size. In 35 games, he has 116 tackles. He averages about a tackle for loss per game, 18 sacks, 6 forced fumbles. But to me, if you're going edge, I don't get why you wouldn't take Nolan Smith. Like, I don't even think Myles Murphy was the best edge available. It's very frustrating because when you're looking at a draft board, and it's so different when the Bengals are picking towards the end of the first round compared to like the top 10, like we were so used to doing for several years in a row. When you're picking around this 25 to 30 range, you're letting the draft board kind of come to you. You're seeing what the players, they're dropping you, see who's going to fall and stuff like that. And they had a prime opportunity to take a guy who absolutely should not be there. Like if Porter, Nolan Smith, and Mayer were gone, I wouldn't have that as big of an issue if they took Myles Murphy. But those just three guys to me, prime opportunity to get a immediate impact player, and we pass up on that and get a guy who I think can be good, but it's just frustrating because I would much rather have Mayer, Joey Porter, or Nolan Smith than Murphy right now for the Bengals.
Yeah, completely agreed. And if this was another scenario, if the Bengals traded down a bit and passed on them, I would have been okay. But at the end of the day, like we kind of keep emphasizing, they took him with other players who were just simply better and could help the team out more. So some people may think we dislike this because it wasn't Michael Mayer or bust. No, it's just simply we don't like the pick because there was better value that could help the team more. Simple as that.
Aaron Petrie says Murphy was an easy pick. The Bengals, it took them about 1 minute to get the pick in. That's something interesting to me because when you looked at the pick. It's like, all right, 10 minutes in the clock. Holy crap! Like 20 seconds in, his already pick was in. To me, it was kind of a situation. Anarumo and Taylor already kind of pointed it out that they did not think Myles Murphy was going to be there, type of deal. And Anarumo already said he's going to be in rotation right away, which, I mean, you're obviously going to say that for a guy who's going to be a first round pick, type of deal. But at the same time, you drafted Daxton Hill last year, and he only had 2 games with 10 defensive snaps. Like it's kind of weird to me when you look at that. But defensive backs in round 2, Cam Smith, Julius Brents. Where does Nolan Smith play in the Bengals? They don't have a position for Smith. He's more of a linebacker. To me, I would have Smith have him play kind of an edge comparable to Myles Murphy. Maybe have him occasionally be in a linebacker, but to me, I feel like he's just an overall better prospect. And if it wasn't for this injury, we're talking about him as arguably being one of the best edge rushers in this class, being drafted above Lucas Finesse from Iowa, who was drafted 13. To me, I feel like Nolan Smith is just overall the better player than Myles Murphy, and I would rather have him at 28 compared to Murphy.
Yeah, I completely agree there. And it is interesting while answering not the question, but the statement that the Bengals didn't think he was going to be there. While they do normally say stuff like that in the interviews, I do find it interesting. They did indeed put the pick in pretty early. I think it was less than 3 minutes. So I do think that was an easy pick for the Bengals. I do think he was on the top of their board, whether if we like it or not. So the Bengals, Zach Taylor and Lou Anarumo got their guy. They're confident in him. And I do think if Murphy's do well in the NFL, he does need a coach like Lou Anarumo with his versatility, who we've seen he's gotten the most out of his players in the past. Eli Apple, for example. So I do think this is one of the better places for him to end up in developing and get to his ceiling. Not saying that's going to happen. I think we've both been pretty clear on how realistic that is, but it is. There are some valid reasons for the Bengals to be excited and to think he can develop. I just am not as excited and have more concerns compared to the rest.
It'll be really interesting with Myles Murphy. I hope he kind of like proves us wrong and stuff. And it's one of those things. We're not negative. We're just kind of telling stuff how it is. And I hate. I messaged you yesterday, and we both agree with it. It's so freaking annoying how there's a draft pick, and let's say, I don't like this pick. It doesn't make sense. It's not the right fit or stuff like that. And you're called a negative fan. You're called a fake fan. You're always negative. I would much rather be like that and realistic than these people who, he's going to come in and have 6, 8, 10 sacks as a rotational edge rookie, like who's a project player. That's not going to happen. We have to kind of set realistic expectations for Myles Murphy and the rest of our draft picks. I mean, I saw somebody yesterday say that Myles Murphy was going to be like Carlos Dunlap. So, I mean, Murphy is a rotational edge guy behind 2 nice edge rushers in Hubbard and Hendrickson, but he's going to be second all time in sacks and a guy who's going to be one of the cornerstones of this defense for like a decade. Like, we got to be realistic about these draft picks. I would say 100%. I would say the same thing about Michael Mayer, Joey Porter Jr., or Nolan Smith. But we kind of have to set more realistic expectations for guys throughout this draft from yesterday, and even the guys we draft later tonight and tomorrow.
Yeah, 100% agreed. And even if he does develop, he does get a few pass rush moves, as we kind of mentioned earlier. More your athletic ability suggests your ability to develop. College production kind of suggest what your impact will be in the NFL, because you can be a really talented player and not really be able to produce. We see that all the time in college. We've seen it all the time in the NFL. So, yeah, he has athletic traits he can develop, but even if he does, it's no guarantee he's going to be a top tier edge, even with his athleticism. So it's going to be interesting to see how far, if you can kind of break that mold of not being as productive in the NFL as you were in college. So, yeah, we'll see. The history and data is against him, but it's obviously not at 100%. There are players who break in that mold, lose a great coach. So trying to look at this from a glass half full standpoint, there is reason for hope. There is reason for excitement. And but yeah, like we keep saying, let's just have realistic expectations. If you're trying to say he's the next Carlos Dunlap, you're setting yourself up for disappointment. If you're thinking he's getting 8 sacks as a rookie, you're setting yourself up for disappointment. That's also not fair on Murphy because we've seen it when people don't meet these unexpected goals or whatever phrase you want to use, then they kind of get attacked. The fans show open disappointment on them, which isn't fair to the player because these rookies aren't going to just simply be able to come in and have 8 sacks. So using that against the players when that should have never been an expectation in the first place is a really bad mistake to hurt the future waiting to happen.
I 100% agree when you're saying with Anarumo. If Murphy's going to be good, Anarumo is a guy who can make something out of somebody. You mentioned Apple, guys like B.J. Hill, who's a mid-round pick, didn't do nothing with the Giants, and he earns a multi-year deal with the Bengals. Been a very productive defensive tackle. So it's interesting because there's tons of just madness that happened throughout round one. I don't think anybody really expected some of the just wild selections, some of the trades. You want to talk about that next? You want to talk about day two picks, draft choices for the Bengals?
I say we stay on the day one train.
All right. So talking about the round one madness. Madness is kind of an understatement. Everybody knew Bryce Young was going to be the first pick. I still don't get that. Honestly, I felt like why give all that draft capital to trade up number one when realistically Bryce Young wasn't probably going to be the first pick anyway. Stroud goes number two. Madness happens with the Texans trading up to number three with the Arizona Cardinals. They get Will Anderson and CJ Stroud. That's the closest thing to a draft day performance, the movie that you're going to see, having two top picks. That's absolutely crazy. But it was much more realistic with the trades, though, by trading up and stuff. But when you look at it, Anthony Richardson was number four. Will Levis, everybody thought he was going to go to Indianapolis number four. He drops out of the first round. Some of these other wild picks here. Jahmyr Gibbs, number 12 to the Detroit Lions. Let's see here. Luca Van Ness, 13 to the Packers. The Lions take Jack Campbell, 18th overall. So those are kind of some of the top ones. What were your kind of initial reactions, or what are your kind of thoughts on some of these picks here?
So I am absolutely shocked at Levis not being drafted into round one. I would say that's what I'm the most shocked about. I honestly, if you would have told me that, even I would have laughed at you. I wasn't really high on Levis, but I thought, given his athletic abilities, his arm, and just the natural value in the NFL of quarterbacks, and there being so many coaches with egos thinking they're the best and can develop these quarterbacks. I thought that was a lock, but it feels like NFL teams kind of got smarter, kind of, I guess you could say, calmed down on it, kind of looked at more realistic understanding just natural athletic abilities is far from guaranteeing it. So I think so while Levis falling out of the round one is very shocking, I you could say from a natural talent standpoint, taking out a positional value, he wasn't even a round one guy. So while I'm beyond shocked, I'm saying perhaps I shouldn't have been because I really don't think at the next level, if I had to bet money on him being successful or not, I'm putting money on no.
And that was kind of the same thing with me with Anthony Richardson. It just seemed like it was a lock that Levis was going to go number four. I don't know how you go from pretty much a lock to be number four 2 days before the draft. There's tons of high people be number one or number two. They go out of the first round. Absolutely insane. To me, I feel like it's just almost as crazy that no team in the first round, towards the end of the first round, traded up to get him. You have a guy who's fourth, fifth pick overall potentially. Why are you not trading up to get that fifth-year option for a guy? I know I've seen the Steelers already, multiple people have already talked to them about trading up for the first pick of the second round. But you're talking about Levis, maybe not panning out in the league. I don't think Richardson is going to be good at all. I'm a Florida fan. He's freaking terrible. Emory Jones was a better passer in college than Anthony Richardson. Call me crazy. I don't think that's a bold take at all. Richardson has tons of potential. But you mentioned earlier about when it comes to stats and players, realistically, when they don't have a good chance of increasing and improving their stats from college to the NFL. Anthony Richardson last season, he played 12 games for Florida. 25% of his games, so 4 games last year, he had a completion percentage of less than 50%. When you look at a guy like C.J. Stroud, his last game with Ohio State was the best game he ever played in his life, playing against Georgia. When you look at that game, he was amazing, making plays left and right for them. He was the only reason they were in that game. And then you look at a guy like Anthony Richardson, who was picked only 2 picks later than C.J. Stroud. And your last impression of Anthony Richardson when he played in a actual game, I believe he was 9 of 27 playing against Florida State, a 33% completion percentage against Florida State. But we have some people even saying that Richardson should have been drafted higher than C.J. Stroud. We talked about this before. The combine was the thing that really set off Anthony Richardson's hype train when his 40-yard dash and all this other stuff. But the combine is so overrated. It used to be just for measurables. Now it's something that people look way into and different things like that. But I don't get why the Colts would have drafted Richardson number 4 when there was so much talk about them getting Levis. I don't like Levis or Richardson, but I feel like Levis has more potential. I feel like Levis right now would be better than Richardson. Richardson is such a project for the Indianapolis Colts, whatever team he go to. But I just don't get why a team would draft Richardson 4th overall. I do not think he's going to be good. I've been wrong before when it's been quarterbacks. I've been right before. But if I had to bet money, I do not think he's going to pan out at all in the league. And it's still crazy to me that a guy who was projected to be in the Heisman conversation this past year in college football did not even have a 2-to-1 touchdown interception ratio, was still the 4th pick in the draft. Absolutely wild to me.
Yeah, and I absolutely would have taken Will Levis over Anthony Richardson. So I think the Colts made a massive mistake in that regard. But yeah, like you said, when you look at the difference between Stroud and Richardson, it really is phenomenal. And it really does feel like such a drop off in just player talent and just expectations of the quarterback and the impact on the team. And speaking of Stroud and the Texans, moving up to Will Anderson, I think that may have been one of the biggest shocks. I don't think anybody was anticipating the Texans to have both 2 and 3. It seemed like it was either going to be Anderson or trade out. So really up until a few hours before the draft, when the sports books changed odds, it felt like it was going to be Will Anderson. So that's when it really felt like the madness really started. And the Texans are taking an awful big risk in trading up for Will Anderson if they end up having a really bad year next year, which I think they will. That could come back to haunt them, and we could maybe see some more too early fires from the questionable organization. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. If they can both reach their ceilings, that will be an awful fun team to watch. But as we said, it's never a guarantee they're going to hit their potential. So Texans, they had some fun yesterday, and I'm definitely going to be wanting to keep an eyes out on both of those guys, see how they perform, see how much statistically they've helped the Texans, because Texans, one of the worst teams last year, now setting themselves up with not first-round picks next year. So they need to make sure these guys hit, and they really helped the team from year one.
Yeah, they've had a really nice, I would say, underrated offseason. They signed Robert Woods. They signed Dalton Schultz, Jimmy Ward. I think they signed Noah Brown as well. The one bad thing is most of their signings are only 1-year deals. I know Robert Woods was a 2-year deal, and I think Jimmy Ward was a 2-year deal, but everybody else is a 1-year contract for Houston. But they definitely had a great draft. I tell you, somebody who had a freaking terrible draft was the Lions. We're having this conversation about Jahmyr Gibbs, if he's there at 28, the Bengals pull the trigger. We're talking about if he's even if he's there at 28, trade back and get him. that was kind of my thing. I liked Gibbs some, but I didn't want him at 28. I wanted us to trade back into the second round or the end of the first round and get Gibbs. There was lots of conversations, lots of talks about Gibbs this past day or so linked to the Bengals, and he doesn't. I mean, he's not even picked. I mean, halfway to 28. I mean, he's picked 12. 16 picks before the Bengals. That is absolutely insane to the Lions of all teams. Like that, talk about a major reach. Like they could have traded back and easily got him. When you look at the Lions, they could have got him with their 18th pick. They had 2 first-round picks. I mean, they have DeAndre Swift. They signed David Montgomery to a multi-year contract. I don't know what their plan is here for the running back situation. And then 18, they draft Jack Campbell, a guy who they would have got with their second-round pick. Literally, both of their picks, they drafted somebody who would have been there 15 spots later, I would say. 12, 15 spots later, each of those 2 picks, they easily had arguably the worst draft of any team, I would say. I just cannot believe that Jahmyr Gibbs pick. We were sitting here, everybody, we were all so shocked. It just did not make any sense, especially since they just signed David Montgomery. Swift is a nice running back. When he's healthy, he's one of the more underrated running backs in the league. But those 2 picks, to me, were probably some of the biggest head scratchers of this draft last night.
Yeah, they took 2 of the least valuable positions in the first round. So that alone is laughable, even if the players were better themselves. So, and like you said, when you look at the players' talent and where they're projected to go, that just makes it so much worse. So, yeah, and it seems like it's being agreed upon everywhere. The Lions had the worst day 1 of the draft. And yeah, Jahmyr Gibbs for us, yeah, we didn't want him round 1. It was not because of the talent necessarily. It was more of the positional value and other guys that can make a difference. But Gibbs, yeah, he's not a top 15 talent in this draft. He's a really fun receiving back, but when he's running between the tackles, he's not all that great. His vision isn't all that great. So if you're going to do that, they better be an elite running back prospect, which, like I said, he wasn't. So, yeah, I think the Lions made some massive mistakes. I don't want to say they necessarily set themselves back, but when you don't hit on your first round picks, that usually comes back to bite you. And even if these players perform somewhat decent, when you pick that early and don't take the players who can be much better, that will come back to bite you.
And when you look at the Lions, they are in just a weird situation at running back. So they have Jahmyr Gibbs, 4-year deal, up to 5 with the 5th-year option. They have Montgomery, I believe it's a 3-year deal. And then they have DeAndre Swift, who has 1 year left in his contract. There's already been talks of several teams talking to Detroit about possibly trading for DeAndre Swift. I'm not trying to be one of those fans anytime somebody's available, say, oh, the Bengals should get him. But DeAndre Swift has 1 year left on his deal. Do you think Cincinnati should offer, let's say, a 4th-round pick or maybe a 3rd-round pick or something like that to Lions to get DeAndre Swift?
I would absolutely love if they could trade a 4th-round pick for Swift. And, if I could certainly justify a 3rd-round pick in that regard, is probably not my first option, but I wouldn't be against it. I would certainly not be mad about it. I like it. Have an established guy, a guy what you're getting from, able to kind of game plan with his abilities. I think he would certainly help the Bengals offense more than a 3rd-round running back to say, but also you do have, when making that decision, you do have to factor in long-term options. But yeah, I would absolutely be okay with the Bengals trading for DeAndre Swift. Just at least calling Detroit at the least certainly wouldn't hurt the organization. So I think the Bengals should definitely at least be interested in making calls just to get an idea of what his value is, what the Bengals could give up for him, and just be staying in the loop.
To me, I'm definitely not offering a 3rd-round pick. I would offer a 4th-round pick, but Swift, he has 1 year left on his deal. He's missed 9 games throughout his career. And when you look at Swift and you look at Mixon, I believe Mixon only has 1 year left on his deal. Swift has 1 year left on his deal. We could be in the same situation, but maybe even worse 1 year from now with our running back situation, since we did not draft one, night 1. Maybe we draft one tonight. But Swift is a really underrated running back. When he's healthy, he can catch at the backfield. He's nice. He'll be a great complement to Mixon. If we were able to re-sign him, if we trade a fourth round pick, I'd be all for that. But a third round pick, to me, I would probably say no, because I feel like second, third, and fourth round picks, the Bengals at times have had a great success of getting some great players in those rounds. Not recently, but I mean, guys like Andy Dalton, guys like Carlos Dunlap, some of those guys were second, third, fourth round picks. Geno Atkins was a fourth round pick, but I would trade a fourth. I wouldn't trade a third. But Swift and Mixon, that would be a great idea for Cincinnati. You would have a guy who already has NFL experience. You're not going to have to, slowly bring somebody into the offense. You're not going to have to, a guy who's a project player who has no NFL experience. I feel like they'd be better off trading a fourth round pick. And maybe even a seventh round pick too, to make it a little bit better for the Lions to go ahead and get somebody who's a already established nice running back compared to a guy who you have no idea who he's going to be. I mean, Mark Walton was a fourth round pick drafting running backs. He was terrible. So yeah, I would be all for the trade a fourth round pick for Swift.
Yeah, so we'll definitely have to see where that goes. I think if a trade happens, that happens tonight. And I also think, since I mentioned we're talking about trades, if Jonah Williams is to be traded, I think that could very well be tonight. As we've talked about a few times, the offensive tackle class, their first wave is pretty deep, but after that first wave, there is a significant drop off. And with the Jaguars taking Anton Harrison at 27, that kind of rounds up the first offensive tackle wave. Earlier in this draft season, guys like DeJuan Jones was being talked about round one, but not anymore because of poor testing, athleticism questions, bad pro day. So I think teams might rather have the established guy, the guy they know what you're getting from, versus guys like those who has some potential, has shown some talent, but a lot of question marks, not knowing what you're getting. And if you need a starter immediately, then Jonah Williams fits that build much more than really any of the other offensive tackle prospects left.
And when you're looking at the offensive line, last night, it seemed like it had potential that there could have been a ton of offensive linemen drafted, because it seemed like they were going earlier than expected. I mean, Paris Johnson was drafted 6th overall. Darnell Wright was drafted 10th by the Chicago Bears. Broderick Jones was drafted 14 by the Steelers, kind of a little bit earlier than people thought. Skoronski, he was drafted 11th to the Titans. So at that point, you kind of thought the tackle, class, what is going to be drafted kind of a little bit higher than expected. And it kind of cooled off with the only one being drafted after that was Harris to Jacksonville. But when you look, kind of looking at this round one here, talking about Gibbs and this, Lions running back situation, talking about, that terrible pick with Gibbs, terrible pick with Jack Campbell. To me, one of the worst picks of the first round has to be Lucas Van Ness going to the Packers at 13. Yeah. I did not want him, even if he dropped to 28. I did not get the hype around him. I'm all for best player available. I know he's on like top 12, top 15 best player available on some people's big boards. I don't think he's that good. I think he's overrated. And you draft him 13 when there was yet to be a wide receiver taken in the draft. Literally, what is the point if you're the Packers? What is the point at all of swapping first round picks with the Jets if you weren't going to draft a wide receiver? Because there was talks and rumors about the Patriots possibly getting maybe a guy like Smith the Jigba, Zay Flowers, one of those guys. There was kind of the same talks about the Jets at 13. You now have this 13th pick when you're the Packers. You can draft any receiver you want, and you take one of the most overrated players in the draft. It's a reach, in my opinion, even though he's talked about one of the best edge rushers. I just do not get that pick at all. That's one of the biggest head scratchers up there with the Jack Campbell and Jahmyr Gibbs pick. I mean, Jahmyr Gibbs was 12. That was a terrible pick. And then Lucas Van Ness was 13 to the Packers. 2 back-to-back terrible picks. You can make a case that, those are like the worst picks of the first round. I just do not understand that for the Packers. I'm sure lots of Packers fans were not happy about that draft selection.
Yeah. What do the Packers have against wide receivers? Like we've seen so many times, and we've even seen T. Higgins kind of joke about that. He thought he was going to be a Packer. but we've seen them many times have a chance to draft a receiver who we've seen become a top 10, top 15 receiver, go for an overrated guy who performs worse. They say the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. The Packers keep having the same success. They take the overrated guy, he doesn't succeed, then they miss out on a top notch wide receiver guy. Hence T. Higgins, just for the easy example for us Bengals guys. So yeah, the Packers really bad draft pick, 100% agree. And no, it's just the same pattern of behavior, which while the Packers, a franchise as a whole, is really good. They need to start winning. They don't have Aaron Rodgers anymore. They're taking a huge risk by going with Jordan Love, the guy who they drafted over T. Higgins. So the first thing you want to do is draft him a wide receiver. I mean, follow the pattern. Other NFL teams started to do it for a reason. Follow the Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase pattern, and they completely missed out on that. And I think that's going to come back to haunt him. I think Ness isn't going to have that productive of a season. I think Love's going to struggle. The receivers there aren't great. They're putting him in a bad situation.
And when you look at the only wide receiver they drafted early these past several years was Christian Watson. Early on in his rookie year, he struggled, but towards the middle and end of the season, he was looking really, really good. So the one time you draft a top wide receiver, and if he pans out, why are you not doing it again? And let's say Jordan Love sucks this year, and maybe they trade him, or maybe they sign a quarterback in the offseason, maybe they draft a quarterback next year. You would already at least have a weapon for that next quarterback. You would have a weapon for Jordan Love. If he struggles, it would make his life easier to have somebody else to throw the ball to. Like, it just makes no sense to me. My mom is a diehard Packers fan, and she was super, super ticked off about that pick. And, I mean, deservedly so. Like, that was a very, very bad pick by the Packers at 13. And when you're looking at this, draft here in round one, when you have guys like Lucas Van Ness going 13, you have Jack Campbell, you have Jahmyr Gibbs, a couple players who you thought were going to be on the board at 28 for Cincinnati. So with those guys being drafted, you knew there was going to be some top players available at 28. We've already talked about Mayer, Porter, and Nolan Smith being available at 28, and we don't draft them. But, when you're heading into night two, I mean, there's still several of these top players that are still somehow available. I don't think anybody thought Michael Mayer was going to drop to round two. I don't think anybody thought Joey Porter Jr. was going to go to round two. Like, it's crazy to me. I mean, there's so many draft prospects the Bengals could be looking at, whether it's in the second round, third round. Maybe they trade up in the second round. They have done that in the past. I think depending on what happens, I would be all for that. So when you're looking at these day two prospects here for the Bengals, who are some of these prospects you'd like the Bengals to be looking at here?
Yeah. So I'm just going to say this first because I've seen this float around a lot. Yeah, the idea of trading up for Michael Mayer is awesome, but they would have to give up a lot. They would need to trade up probably a top 5 pick in the second round to get that, because eventually a team's just going to see Mayer's talent being probably the top guy on their board, having a first round grade. And they're probably like, you know what? Not a huge team need, but he's the best guy on the board, and do what good teams do. So would I like that? Absolutely. Do I think that's going to happen? Absolutely not. So, we talked about DeJuan Jones as a round one guy. We kind of referred that earlier. There's now a huge possibility he's there round two. Like I said, that's where I take a guy like DeJuan Jones. He has some risk. He has some concerns, but this is late round two for a reason. There's not going to have those perfect prospects. So I think that's a guy you take the risk on. He fits your offense. He's really big, has really long arms, so there's some potential there. Given our recent success of developing offensive linemen we've drafted, gives me concerns, but I envision in a world, if he's there at 60, I would have to imagine he's one of the better players available on the board as well. So I do legitimately think if DeJuan Jones is there at 60, that is going to be the Bengals pick. I don't know if DeJuan Jones will be available. That being said, I feel like he is now the best offensive tackle prospect left. So we'll see. But there's been a lot of stuff shown, a lot of analytics shown that there's a good chance he will be there. So it'll just be interesting to see. And trades are obviously obviously going to be playing a lot of impact on that. So, but I would absolutely love that draft pick. Another popular name is Cam Smith. He's somebody who I go up and down for. Obviously, I love his film. I think just as a player, he has a lot of talent, but man, that size and height concerns me a lot. And again, it's kind of round two. You have more flexibility to take that risk. So I certainly wouldn't hate it, but I just have a lot of concerns about that.
When you're looking at Cam Smith, to me, I feel like he was linked to the Bengals at 28. If he's there at 60, I would probably pull the trigger depending else who's available. I mean, because he's going to probably be best player available in your corner. We already kind of talked about it's one of the top 4 needs for Cincinnati. And when you look at DeJuan Jones, I was 100% not on board drafting an offensive lineman unless Paris Johnson, Skoronski, Darnell Wright, one of those guys dropped. Realistically, we knew they weren't going to be there at 28. I hated the idea of getting DeJuan Jones at 28. If he's there at 60, that's completely different. He's going to be best player available if he's there at 60. He's a team need, best player available and team need, A+ pick, pretty much no matter what, all the time. But, they did a good job of not reaching for DeJuan Jones at 28. But if he's there at 60, I feel like you got to pull the trigger. But when you look at offensive line, one of the reasons why I wasn't sold on them drafting one in the first round, and even if DeJuan Jones isn't there at 60, I'm still hesitant to drafting any offensive lineman pretty much at 60, because if you can't develop these top round 1, round 2 offensive linemen, and it's not like it's just one offensive line coach, it's not like it just happened one time. It's year in and year out. This Bengals offensive line coaching staff, this Bengals offensive line cannot develop offensive linemen to save their lives. Cedric Ogbuehi, Jake Fisher, Jonah Williams, Billy Price, Jackson Carman, those are all first or second round draft picks. And those are all the past 7 or 8 years. None of them have been anything in the NFL. None of them are even close to being above average. All of them have been busts so far throughout their career. My thing is, when you're looking at all those guys, those are all first or second round picks. And if you're drafting a lineman in rounds 3, 4, 5, if you can't develop an offensive lineman in rounds 1 or 2, the guys who are supposed to be the premier picks at their position, these top guys at their position, whether it's a left tackle, right tackle, if you can't develop them, how are you going to be able to develop a third or fourth round guy who is raw, who's a project, who's not nearly as talented compared to some of these first and second round guys? If DeJuan Jones isn't there at 60, I would say the only other offensive lineman I would consider taking at 60 will be Cody Mock from North Dakota State. And even then, it just kind of depends on what the board is. If it's Cam Smith or Cody Mock, I'm taking Cam Smith 100% of the time, depending what else is available. But yeah, we don't take a lineman at 60. I'm more than likely, I'm not on board taking an offensive lineman pretty much at any point in the draft. And I know it's kind of an unpopular opinion, but I feel like there's things to kind of back up my case on that. I just don't like the idea of drafting linemen if they're not best player available, because even when we've drafted a lineman who's been supposed to be really good, they've not panned out remotely close to what they should have been with Cincinnati. But DeJuan Jones would be a great pick at 60. Looking at some of these other guys, I mean, you mentioned Cam Smith. With Michael Mayer still being available, I feel like that is completely switching the tight end situation, because we didn't think Michael Mayer was going to be available heading into the second round. So now that's pushing back Darnell Washington, Sam Laporta, Kraft, some of these other guys. So Darnell Washington, to me, I'm not going to lie, I was kind of concerned the Bengals were going to trade back their first round pick and trade back into the second round and draft Darnell Washington, because to me, he's kind of what the Bengals wish they had in Drew Sample, an elite blocking tight end, but he's far more athletic. Darnell Washington, to me, I liked Michael Mayer and Kincaid much more than Darnell Washington. If he's there at 60, I would say he has to be somebody you have to consider there. Sam Laporta, depending, maybe if you trade back into the third round with your second round pick, I kind of be more for that. Kind of same thing with Kraft as well. But its tight end situation is just very interesting, because with Mayer still gone, all these other tight ends are slowly going to be, going to be on the board longer. I honestly have no idea where he's going to go. I've seen mock drafts I've seen mock drafts have him be gone by the Bengals' third round pick. I've seen the Bengals draft him. I've seen teams draft him in the mid fourth round or early fifth. I really like Zach Kuhn from Old Dominion. He's a guy who is He's a guy who has amazing size. He's 6'7". He's like 260 pounds. He ran a 4.5 at the combine. In the 2021 season with Old Dominion, he had over 70 receptions, over nearly 700 yards, and 5 touchdowns. He is an athletic freak. He was first in the broad jump and first in the vertical leap at the combine among tight ends. He was second among tight ends in the 40-yard dash. He reminds me a lot of Jelani Woods a year or so ago from Virginia. He has great measurables. He has potential to be really good. He played great just a year or so ago with Old Dominion, but he's kind of more of a a round 3 pick to me for Cincinnati. But I feel like now when you're looking at the situation for the Bengals, you're looking at, tight ends, corner, maybe offensive line, depending who's available. But you still got to be looking at best player available and not just team needs when it comes to heading into night 2.
Yeah, absolutely agreed. And these are really hard to predict because yesterday like you said, no one predicted Mayer falling round 2. And the draft's just going to get more confusing from now. It's easier for teams to trade now that it's not a first round pick. And for example, the Steelers, yeah, they have pick 32. When you look at the pick numerically, it kind of is a first round pick. But no, it's been reported. While making this video, got a little ESPN notification about it. A bunch of teams are calling, and yeah, it's still gonna cost a decent amount trading up there, but it's obviously going to be easier and cheaper than trading for a first round pick. There's going to be teams looking to trade up. We don't know what's happening with Will Levis. We don't know what teams are high on him versus teams not high on him, because there's obviously a simple scenario where, yeah, these teams need quarterbacks, but they just don't think Levis is the guy. Teams don't think the quarterback's a guy and they don't have confidence in him, then they won't draft him. Simple as that. So there's just so many uncertains, and it's like we keep saying, it's so hard to predict. I would also love if Darnell Washington was there. He's one of my favorite guys like you. I was really concerned he would be an option at pick 28 or trading back. But yeah, if you're getting him at 60, that's really great value. Like you said, hoping he's what they hoped Drew Sample would be as a blocker. And then you throw in some potential with his receiving game. As Drew Sample, his data never suggested he would be a great receiving tight end. Darnell Washington data says otherwise. So you have some more potential in that regard. Maybe even your long-term option guy if you can develop him well. So there's certainly a lot of options. And like you kind of said, of Mayer falling, that kind of gives us an advantage with the tight ends in this draft. Want to give them options. I would be all about them trading down for Laporta. I really like him, and I could even justify pick 60 depending on who's on the board, though I doubt there's a scenario where he is the best player on the board. But no, you never know. Days 2 and 3s get crazy, but if we're following kind of from the genuine big board, the popular belief big board, I do think one of these guys we really like, whether if it's Cam Smith, DeJuan Jones, Washington, one of those guys will be there. So I'm excited to see. I'm nervous because we just don't know.
So when you're looking at tight ends, what tight end would you say you probably want the most right now? Kind of realistically, though.
Realistically, I mean, Washington, if that is realistic, he's my next highest ranked tight end. After him, I do have Laporta. So those are the next 2 tight ends. I do think there is a noticeable drop off between Mayer and Kenny to Washington, then another noticeable drop off between Washington and Laporta.
Because to me, like when I've done mock drafts, heading into it, if I didn't have the Bengals taking Mayer at 28, at that point, 60, there was pretty much no chance Darnell Washington was going to be there. So I pretty much always took Zach Kuntz from Old Dominion in round 3. But with Mayer dropping, that means Washington, Laporta, all these guys are going to drop, which means Zach Kuntz is going to drop. And you don't want to take a chance of waiting out for the tight end market. Then all of a sudden, when the next pick happens, pretty much all the top guys are gone. If Darnell Washington if Darnell Washington to me, if he's there at 60, unless DeJuan Jones is there, I would say he pretty much has to be the pick, just because that's best player available. That's a team need. He could have a big impact on the Bengals right now. He could. I mean, he like I said, he's kind of what the Bengals wish they had in Drew Sample. I will say I am kind of nervous though when it comes to Cincinnati in the second round, or even first round at times. When you look at it, it seems like they fixated on players. They fixated on Drew Sample. They traded back and they still got him. They could have got him 2 rounds later. They fixated on Jackson Carman. They could have got Creed Humphrey 2 different times. They could have got him at their second round pick, and then when they traded back, he was still there. But they took Jackson Carman instead. That's kind of something I'm kind of looking at here. I hope the Bengals don't fixate on a certain player, whether that's at 60 or trading back. I hope they make the right selection and draft the best player available, because that's always, always, always what you should be doing in a draft.
Yeah, completely agree. And, you could also kind of make an argument they fixated on Myles Murphy yesterday. Just kind of the way Zach Taylor was talking. And so, yeah, like the Jackson Carman pick still irritates me when you look at all the other offensive linemen available. Drew Sample, even himself said he was not expecting to go round 2 in the draft. So the Bengals need to just be smart. Don't fixate. Like you said, you shouldn't do that in the draft. It's that simple. You need to look at the board like we've talked about in the past leading up to the draft. Good teams don't reach. They take good players. We referenced the New England Patriots. They take best player available, and they've had their franchise success speaks for itself.
Talking about fixating the Bengals on players, I don't get how I forgot about Billy Price. I mean, that was a guy they completely fixated on. Still to this day, that pick infuriates me. It was a terrible pick, and people still try to justify that pick just because he played Ohio State. I feel like that's one of the reasons why. But when you look at it, it's interesting because when looking at day 2, there's some good running backs available. And when you look at the past, the Bengals have 2017, 18, 19, 2021. They've traded their second round picks back and got somebody. Now, granted, at those picks, those were like premier second round picks. They were like in the top 10. Now they're picking towards the end of the second round. It is a possibility maybe they trade back into the third round against somebody. But when you look at the Bengals, they traded back to get Joe Mixon in 2017 in the second round. They drafted, I believe, Giovanni Bernard in the second round and Jeremy Hill in the second round too, I believe. So when you're looking at these running backs, the Bengals have a history of drafting running backs in the second round. The second round is tonight. Tons of talks about Mixon. He isn't even guaranteed to be on the roster this upcoming season. So when you're looking at maybe not necessarily prospects in round 2, but when you may be looking at prospects in round 2 and 3, who are some running backs you're looking at here for maybe the Bengals to possibly pick up and be the running back in the future to replace Joe Mixon?
So my 2 personal favorite is Spears from Kentucky, and then the Pitt running back. I probably need to learn how to pronounce his name, especially as one of my guys in the draft. But that's just something I'm going to wait till if the Bengals draft him or not. But those are kind of 2 of my favorite guys. I really like. I think Spears. I would like to see more in the receiving game. He does have some stuff left to be desired, but I do think he's a bit underrated in that regard compared to the popular consensus. So I would really like him. With the Pitt running back, kind of the same thing. I would still like to see a bit more in the receiving game as well, but I think he does a really nice. I really like his vision, especially between the tackles. Kind of opposite of Gibbs. With Gibbs, I said he doesn't really have great vision, can do a better job bouncing back. I think the Pitt running back, we see him do that rather consistently. And on a team with the Bengals offensive line, we're seeing it improve. But when you guys like Volson who's still improving, you're going to need to have that vision. You're going to need to be able to bounce back and readjust your route to find the open hole. All the great running backs need to do it. Even the running backs who have great offensive line, if they're really good, it's because they have those abilities, just not because they have linemen opening holes. Those are 2 of my guys, you could say guys who I'd be really excited the Bengals took. So those are a few of my 2 of my running backs who I definitely really like in the third round.
I like Spears from Tulane a lot in the third round, but I feel like he's a guy who, if he's there, I don't know if it's too early for him or what, because I've seen some stuff. I mean, he could be their third round pick. I've seen some stuff. He could be their fourth round pick. It's so interesting because when you're looking at these kind of like draft big boards, let's say Mache has somebody who's 10, but Jeremiah might have him at 30. I feel like this year more than other years, just the big boards and the position rankings are just completely all over the place when it comes to stuff. So you don't really know how to predict where some of these guys will go. But I like Spears a lot in the third round. The fourth round, though, to me, I like a guy like Tank Bigsby if he's there. Dwayne McBride from UAB, I've seen pretty much he could be in fourth from seventh. I think he's extremely underrated. You mentioned the guy from Pittsburgh. I'm not going to lie. I don't know much about the guy from UCLA. You think he would be a good option the second round or third round?
I don't know as much about him as well, to be honest. Based off the limited things I've seen, I think he could be, but like I said, that's very limited. So I would be lying if I gave a true opinion. I also like the Oklahoma running back, Gray. I forget his first name, but he's somebody else who I think would fit really well into the Bengals offense. I think he's a fourth round guy. So I think that's definitely in the Bengals department. They like you said earlier, Mark Walton, fourth round pick. So we've definitely seen them do it before. It's going to be all about where Gray looks, where he is on the Bengals big board. But he's somebody, the Bengals took him round 4. I would get really excited.
One thing that I think is extremely important, and I don't think it's being talked about, the Bengals absolutely have to hit out of the ballpark tonight on round 2 and 3. Because when you look at Zach Taylor, since he's been the coach, in my opinion, they have drafted historically bad on day 3. When you look at Marvin Lewis, holy crap. Like during his time, you could pretty much mark out there's going to be one guy, an absolute stud, they draft on day 3, may even be an undrafted free agent. I know lots of people didn't like Erickson towards the end, but he was really serviceable when he first came to Cincinnati. He was an undrafted free agent. Perfect. My favorite all-time Bengals player. One of the best players, one of the best linebackers in the league was an undrafted free agent. George Loka was a 5th-round pick. Marvin Jones was a 5th-round pick. Like I said, Atkins was a 4th-round pick. Uzama was a 6th-round pick. I'm sure there's several others, but when you're looking at the Zach Taylor era, that's where it's completely different. McPherson was a 5th-round pick. I mean, to me, as of right now, I really don't know who else you can say, like, oh, that guy's really panned out type of deal. I know we re-signed Trevion Williams. He was drafted in 2019, but he's not really played great compared to his, college production. I feel like he's played good in the limited snaps that he's had, but I mean, to justify that he's been great for the Cincinnati, you guys like Cam Sample, some of those guys, they've showed potential. But to me, I don't think they've showed enough to say that's a great pick by Cincinnati. Then they've had some freaking terrible ones. I know me and you hated this pick. Tyler Shelvin, that pick made absolutely no sense. The only reason people liked that pick and weren't complaining is because he played with Burrow at LSU. Like, that pick was terrible. It made absolutely no sense. I'm really, really nervous about the Bengals having a really bad draft tomorrow because history shows it's very likely it's going to happen again because it's happened pretty much every single year since that Taylor's been the coach. So it's very important the Bengals have a great draft selection when it comes to rounds 2 and 3 tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. Like we've been saying, it's been kind of boom or bust with more bust. So we need to see, But on the other side, they've had T. Higgins, kind of an obvious success. They've gotten guys Jermaine Prime, Logan Wilson. So we've certainly seen they can find talent, but you need to do that consistently, which they haven't done. But if they can get a guy on those talent levels, if they can find, you could even say a steal like that, that would be awesome. That would help the team so much, especially when you're on the verge of being a Super Bowl winning team. So yeah, they absolutely do need to kill it out if they want to be the team to stomp over the Chiefs again, make it to the Super Bowl, win the Super Bowl. They need to be able to draft well late because that's what could give them the advantage over a few of these other teams.
And you look at Pacheco, I think he was like undrafted or a 7th-round pick or something like that. The Bengals have not really had that production when it comes to players like that these past couple of years. A guy, one of the few exceptions I really liked since Taylor's been the coach when it comes to day 3 picks was Akeem Davis Gaither. I wanted him in the third round. Like, I was upset we took Wilson. I like Davis Gaither more than Wilson coming out of the 2020 draft, because after we drafted Wilson, I'm like, well, crap, there's no way we're going to draft Davis Gaither, because we're not going to go back to back with linebacker. We take him in the first pick of the fourth round. So happy. But he's a guy, honestly, he's not really played as great as what I thought he'd be. I was really high on him coming out of the draft. I mean, now he only has 1 year left on his deal, but he's a guy, even him, who was a good draft choice. He just hasn't panned out. One of the few good draft choices that they've had on day 3 picks. He hasn't panned out, but I mean, hopefully that will change when it comes to tonight. Hopefully they hit it out of the ballpark, and then hopefully tomorrow they have some good draft choices as well. So when you're looking around the draft, everybody's talking about the draft and stuff like that. And what happened yesterday, so many trades, so many news headlines, like Will Levis dropping out of the first round. But before the draft, Lamar Jackson signed a 5-year deal worth $260 million. That's crazy to me. Like, to me, I'm really, really happy about this. I know it sounds kind of stupid, but this makes the Ravens cap situation really, really bad. So they're not going to be able to maybe trade or sign some of these top guys now. And with Lamar Jackson being in the Ravens for 5 years, I'm not trying to sound like one of these cocky, arrogant Bengal fans, but to me, that pretty much for the next 5 years, that has the Bengals winning the AFC North as long as Joe Burrow is the quarterback. I've said this so many times. I mean, most Bengal fans would agree. The Bengals play the Ravens better than anybody. The Bengals defense plays Lamar Jackson better than anybody. There's not a single defense in the NFL that plays Lamar Jackson better than the Bengals defense. I was really surprised by that contract. It came out of pretty much nowhere. I know it will make Burrow's contract money per year go up higher, but it was going to happen anyway. If it wasn't Lamar Jackson getting a contract, it was going to be Justin Herbert anyway. But I could not believe Jackson going to the Ravens. That was just a signing that just came out of absolutely nowhere.
I completely agreed with everything you just said. I think the Bengals play Lamar Jackson the best. I think they play Patrick Mahomes as one of the best. Lou loves these type of quarterbacks because he's figured them out. So, yeah, in the sense for Joe Burrow, not the best thing to happen. But when it comes to actually playing the Ravens, needing to win against them to be so you can win the division, Lamar playing, that helps us. We figured him out. We've seen Lamar really struggle against us, missing throws. When we get pressure on him, he struggles even more. So I think, yeah, I'm glad Lamar's back on the Ravens. I think the Bengals will figure him out. I think they'll confuse them. I think they'll beat them this year, definitely at least once. 2 times, we'll see. We're still way early on, but regardless, yeah, I'm glad Lamar's back. I think, we kind of talked about this last week. Would we rather the Ravens have Anthony Richardson or Lamar Jackson? We both said Lamar Jackson because, yeah, Richardson, there's a lot of wild card stuff about him, but Lamar, we know what we're getting, and what we're getting, we know we can beat that.
I did a poll on Twitter. I can't remember what the percentage was, but I asked the same question. For the next 5 years, would you rather have Anthony Richardson or Lamar Jackson for the Ravens? I'm thinking for the next 5 years, who would you rather play against? And I'm thinking like 2/3 of people said they'd rather play Anthony Richardson, which to me is crazy because Lamar Jackson's never going to get better at this point in his career. He's only declined since his 2019 MVP performance. Richardson has all the potential in the world, but if he just put it all together, I feel like even half is what, if he can play half as good as people think it's going to be, I feel like it'd be very, very good. But yeah, with Jackson, I feel like this has to be one of the worst contracts in NFL history. I know people might call me a hater, but everything we've talked about Lamar Jackson is the truth. He's a guy who is terrible when it comes to passing game. When it comes to pure passing, he's pretty much average. The only thing that separates him from any other quarterback in the league is his explosiveness when it comes to his running ability. But this has to be one of the just dumbest contracts in NFL history, easily.
Yeah, 100% agree. Okay, camera's working now. Sorry, but yeah, I agree. This will definitely come back to hurt the Ravens. Right now, they're just a hype team. Yeah, they have Odell, they have Lamar. They're a lot of fun to play in Madden. This isn't Madden. This is real life. They have an overrated wide receiver. I don't even know if you say overrated now. A lot of people kind of clown the signing. Yeah, have Lamar, who's going to miss a lot. Their pick reminded me, Zay Flowers. He reminds me of Hollywood Brown a lot, and we saw Hollywood Brown's success in Baltimore. Far from a bad player, but there's a reason he got frustrated. Lamar wasn't throwing to him. There's no, and they're going to have the same offense as they did before. Receivers, as we've seen, isn't something the Ravens value as much, isn't something they use as much. So their pick kind of, I saw them taking a receiver. If I was them, I would have not done that. But yeah, they're just having a hype team. They're going to have a lot of, you can say, fun guys, but we've seen their offensive scheme doesn't get them far. They lose against the best teams, and that's why they've only had one postseason with Lamar Jackson where they didn't have that great of a run like we've always talked about, one playoff win. He had an accumulated MVP on one really good season. We People want to talk about Lamar as the best quarterback, but we just haven't seen that success in the postseason. As we saw with Andy Dalton, if you can't succeed in the postseason, then you need to kind of get another guy. They had a chance to do that. They had a chance to get rid of this drama, get a guy who's shown more success in postseason, and they didn't, which is fine by me and fine by you, obviously. But when you look at it from an unbiased analyst standpoint, that was a very bad decision by the Ravens, both the contract and their draft pick.
Like, I feel like the Ravens did the right thing by signing him because realistically, you have to have somebody of his caliber and his speed. It's the way their offense works. You have to have a mobile quarterback to succeed in that offense. Look at Huntley, look at all these other backup quarterbacks, even RG3 a couple of years ago. They're all the exact same. They have to be a mobile quarterback. And at this point, it's going to, like, you have to have either Huntley or you have to trade up for a guy like Richardson. At that point, I would say you're better off keeping Jackson if you're the Ravens, but the money per year is just absolutely ridiculous. And we're talking about a guy who, like, take away the running ability, I don't think he's that much different than Andy Dalton. They're both overrated They're not good passers. Jackson's elite running is what separates him from anybody else, but passing ability, he's average at best. Literally, of all the games last year for Cincinnati, the one that made me mad the most was that Sunday night game when we played him so freaking good. We played the Ravens so good. He had two wide open receivers. Like, nobody was within 5 yards from him, and he overthrew both of them, and we still ended up losing that game. And we had that shuffle pass to Stanley Morgan or something like that. That game was just so frustrating because we were the better team that game. Once again, our defense stepped up playing against that Ravens offense, and we just weren't able to get it done. But, I mean, a guy who's 1-3 in the playoffs, making over a 1-3 in the playoffs, is statistically a worse quarterback in the playoffs than Tim Tebow, and he's making $250 million in the next 5 years. That is insane to me. Like, I don't get how anybody could justify that. And I know Burrow's going to get the same contract, but he'll get more. But Burrow's at least done something to prove that he's worth that money and that type of money. But I don't know. I know some people like ESPN, they're overreacting. Oh, that's a great deal and stuff like that. I mean, they were overreacting when they signed Odell Beckham, how they're going to be one of the contenders in the AFC. They're contenders in the AFC North. I know it's an unpopular opinion. I think the Steelers are the biggest threat in the AFC North aside from the Bengals. Aside from the Bengals, the Steelers are the best team in the AFC North. That may change how the draft is today and tomorrow. But, I mean, by the time the NFL season starts, Odell Beckham would not play an NFL snap in 19 months. Lamar Jackson's had back-to-back games, back-to-back seasons with season-ending injuries. He's only got worse year after year after year. This hype for them is ridiculous. I feel like the Ravens and Bills, to me, are easily by far the most overrated teams heading into the 2023 season.
Yeah, completely agree. Lamar, like, yeah, he's had some bad luck with injuries, but you still have to consider that and value that, especially with his play style. That's something to be concerned about. This wasn't a Joe Burrow had a very unlucky, very bad torn ACL, but that's not because of his injury prone. It's because Michael Jordan wasn't a very good right guard in the NFL. Lamar, we've seen him get different in different ways, especially having a knee injury. That is very concerning. That is something with his style of play you don't want to see and makes that contract even riskier. And if he has an early ending season again, that contract is even worse, which I don't want him to get injured. I never wish it upon everybody, but if he misses half the season again, that's the Ravens have set them up for failure because Tyler Huntley isn't coming in and taking over that offense. So the Ravens are paying a pretty, I don't want to say injury prone, but somebody who's viable for injuries with a very rare postseason success, as we've liked to kind of use as an example, kind of the Andy Dalton of big games with his play style. I just think they're putting way too much faith and way too much money into somebody who hasn't really proved he is worth that much.
Yeah, absolutely crazy signing, and it's crazy how this Lamar Jackson, saga, it's been going on for months and months and months now. It's kind of being overshadowed by the draft. Happened right before the draft, but the draft is kind of getting more coverage and everything. But it'll be very interesting to see how that plays out. Hopefully, he plays terrible. Realistically, odds are when he plays the Bengals, he's probably going to play bad, and the Ravens will probably play bad. But when we look at the draft, it's kind of talking about the Myles Murphy pick, or we're reacting to that, kind of giving our thoughts on that. Some day 2 picks for the Bengals, kind of talking about this absolutely wild round 1 draft last night, talking about the crazy picks from there, whether it was Jahmyr Gibbs going to the Lions or Lucas Van Ness going to the Packers. A couple other, things as well. So, Braeden, can you kind of tell some listeners where they can follow you on social media?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can follow me on Instagram, Bengals_NFL. That is where I am the most active. You can follow my YouTube channel. It's just my name, Braeden Guthrie. Now, after the draft is out, I'm going to be posting a lot of videos. I'm going to be doing a video of just kind of grades, a best and worst pick, just kind of stuff like that to get us through the off season. As you know, after the draft, it's kind of a long wait. So try and give us some entertainment in that regard. And you can follow me on Twitter, Bengals_action. And in the Twitter name, you'll see Bengals NFL.
Yeah, I'll make sure to put the links in the description below so people can check out your content on all the social media platforms. You can follow me, the Sports Duhine Show, on Instagram, S Duhine Show on Twitter. Thank you all so much for watching. If you're new to the channel, or if you've seen my videos before, I would really, really appreciate it if you could subscribe to my channel and like this video. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all next time on the Sports Duhine Show.